Would you like to learn how to create this? Or maybe you like that? Today's video will be all about rocks. Welcome to another Planet Zoo tutorial, and this time I will try to teach you something about rocks. Hello guys, this is Cesar Creates, and welcome back to my channel. You guys really seem to enjoy my previous foliage tutorial, and a lot of you wanted to see a rockwork tutorial next, so here I am. I am not a huge expert when it comes to rockwork, but I will try to share with you in detail what techniques I normally use in my habitats in Planet Zoo. This video will be all about rock piles, small stones, combining different kinds of rocks, and rock walls, so if you would like to learn more about them, stay tuned. I have recorded this tutorial in the PC version of Planet Zoo, but I am sure that it will be equally useful for the console players, and even for Planet Coaster 2 players, as rocks in that game are basically the same. Okay, so without any further ado, let's begin. Let's go through some basics and tips right now, and after that we'll create the entire rockwork for a habitat together. Let's start with our regular good old rocks that have been with us from the very beginning of Planet Zoo. How to create those big rock formations that look good? Let's take one of our rocks and examine it. As you can see, we are clearly looking at the rock. But what we can observe is that it has different textures on its surface. And paying attention to those surfaces for me is a key to creating realistic looking rock formations. As you can see, most of the models of the rocks in the game have those parts with this irregular rough texture. And placing the rocks in the way that this texture sort of flows from one rock to another always works amazing. That's why some of my favorite rocks that I often use in my builds are numbers 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 11 and all the rock cladding pieces. Don't be afraid to experiment and tilt the rocks in all different directions. As long as those textures will meet each other, you should be good. Remember that the goal is to create formations that look realistic, so you can't go wrong with using real-life natural rock formations as inspiration. If you want even more texture and depth and want to spice up your rock formations even more, consider mixing rocks from different biomes. Some of those colors work really great together, and in real life the rock formations are rarely in one solid color. Here are some combinations that I think work really good together. The temperate and taiga rocks, the desert and the savanna rocks, the tropical and the dynamic mossy rocks, the dynamic mossy rocks and the mossy rocks, the tundra and taiga rocks, of course the snow and ice rocks, and the tundra and volcanic rocks. Let's stay with the topic of the biomes for one more minute, as there is one more thing that I would like to mention here. Just as with plants, don't limit yourself to one type of the rocks that matches the biome of the animal you are currently building for. I personally look at those rock labels as only the suggestions, and some of them really work well for a variety of different types of enclosures. Especially my favorite temperate rock that works amazing for tropical environments but can also look great on the African savanna inspired enclosures or desert. And for example, the tropical rocks work really well for temperate inspired habitats or more hilly ones for mountain animals. This of course doesn't apply to all the rocks, as savanna rocks could look a bit weird in the polar bear habitats, but again, don't be afraid to experiment here. In Planet Zoo, we are trying to create a zoo. Shocking, right? To help ourselves do that, we often use the inspiration from real-life zoos, and this is also very useful when it comes to the ideas for rocks in our habitats. During my zoo visits, I noticed that a lot of enclosures feature various rock piles, and their purpose is not only to decorate the habitats. Very often those rock piles limit the animals like elephants, rhinos, antelopes and more from reaching certain parts of the enclosure to, for example, make sure that they won't be able to reach the plants that are growing there and destroy them by eating, biting and stomping. For smaller animals like rodents, lizards, snakes, etc., those rock piles provide a place of shelter. They can squeeze in between the rocks and rest there. To create this rock pile that I am often using in my habitats, you need a lot of smaller rocks. So firstly, try to go through all the available rocks in Planet Zoo and try to remember which ones are the smallest ones, and then try to combine them like by placing them next to each other. But you can also use those bigger, thin and long rocks by sinking them to the ground so that only the tip is visible. In this tutorial, I already mentioned mixing different rocks from different biomes, and it just works perfect for those rock piles. So in here I am using a mixture of the temperate and taiga rocks so that those rocks have not only different shapes but also different colors. What also looks amazing every time is placing the buffalo grass in between those rocks. Just as I'm doing it in here. After you'll be done with all of that, just group all the rocks that you just placed and the buffalo grass, and then you can randomly place those piles next to each other, and by rotating them a bit you can really sell this idea that those are completely custom big rock formations. Let's move to something smaller that you probably saw in all of my recent habitats, the small stones. I very often get questions from you guys about them because you can't find them anywhere. This is because I created them myself using the tiny faux rocks that I think were introduced to the game with the Euro pack. You can find them in the rock tab, just look for the faux rocks. To create this pile of small stones, or the rubble, or however you want to call it, make sure that the random rotation all is turned on because it will really make it easier for you. Place those tiny faux rocks next to each other and sink them slightly into the ground, making sure that each of them is on a slightly different height and also rotated in a different way thanks to the random rotation all tool. I would also recommend placing more of those smaller stones than the bigger ones. After you'll be happy with your rock pile, make sure to merge all of those small rocks into one group and then change the colors of the rock. I like to go for something more in the earthy tones, but the gray colors also work really well, especially for more mountainous enclosures. And of course, you just can't go wrong with adding some plants like the buffalo grass in between those rocks. I use it in all of my habitats and it always looks good. I love to use those small stones in between the plants or close to the bigger rocks, so they sort of look like a rubble that has been broken off the bigger rock formations. Now let's talk about the big thing, the rock walls. It is very common for zoos to use them in variety of different habitats as they provide a very natural and nice looking background for the enclosures. But this is not the only purpose of the rock walls, as they are often used as habitat barriers or provide enrichment for climbing animals. I personally just love to use rock walls in my habitats, you guys probably know this by now. And in here I would love to show you how I normally create them. In my past habitats on this channel I used 3 different kinds of rock walls using the regular rocks, the faux rocks and the stalagmites. I will show you right now how to create all those 3 types of rock walls, and you can decide which way is your favorite. Let's start with the regular rocks. To create a detailed rockwork using those rocks, I would recommend to firstly place the vertical wall and turn on the align to the surface setting. It will just be easier for you, and after being done with the wall you can always delete the modular wall and you'll just be left with the rock wall. We don't want this wall to be too thick because it can be quite problematic later to use it in the indoor enclosures, as it will be just sticking out of the building, out of the wall, or just out of this habitat a lot. So what I am trying to do in here is to use all of the flat rocks that we have in the game and tilt them into different directions, but still paying attention to the thickness of this wall. Tilting the rocks into different directions is very important because we don't want this wall to be too flat. We want it to look natural, and those natural rock formations normally have some crevices, some irregular textures. That's why I am tilting them, but that's why I'm also using a different kind of rock. So in here I'm again mixing the temperate rocks and the taiga rocks for some added color. I'm also trying to follow and enhance some natural lines that occur in those rock formations to sort of resemble the influence of the dripping water on those rock formations, if that makes any sense. And this is our final product, the rock wall done with the regular rocks in Planet Zoo, and you can even spice it up a bit by adding some plants to it. In here, for example, I used the periwinkle leaves. Now let's move to the faux rocks. As you guys probably noticed by now, I wasn't mentioning them a lot in this video, and the explanation for that is simple. I'm not a huge fan of them. I just think that their overall design doesn't really match some of the newer models of Planet Zoo animals, and they can look very repetitive in bigger habitats. However, here is my favorite way of using them for the rock walls that I used to use all the time in the past. Let's take this aquatic faux rocks number 6 and place it vertically. After that, let's copy it over and over again, every time rotating it slightly and also every time changing the height a little bit. We want to end up with a round shape resembling something like a club, like the weapon club. You can also flip this rock upside down and added this flipped version several times to this rock formation to make it look a bit more interesting. After you'll be done, merge all the rocks into one group, change the color into something more in the earthy tones, and also changing the colors of the cracks of those rocks to white, make them look really pop up. After that, copy this club several times and rotate it every time you place it. And this is our finished rock formation. And it will look even better if you place several plants on top of it. Now let's move over to my holy grail, the stalagmite pieces from the Twilight pack. Ever since they were introduced to the game, I just fell in love with them and I can't stop using them for those rock walls. Here is how you can use them to create your own rock walls. This is unfortunately the most time-consuming technique out of those three. It requires a lot of patience and a lot of individually placed pieces. What you need to do is take this one long stalactite and flip it upside down, so it becomes a stalagmite, I guess. Change the color of it to something that you like, and then begin to place those one by one next to each other so they sort of overlap each other. The goal here is to be very smooth and very precise. Wherever there is a bigger crevice in between those stalagmites, I always make sure to fill it with more pieces because again the goal here is to be smooth. Also, if you want to make them in the irregular heights, you also need to be very careful to just place the item one by one and change the height ever so slightly, because to me this is how they look the best. Also make sure not to do them too flat. I always like to create some dents and basically create some depth, because this makes those rock formations really come to life. For even more texture, you can add those bigger and shorter stalagmite pieces. Just one tip here, make sure to adjust the color of them, because if you'll change the color of them to the same one that you chose for the longer stalagmite pieces, the colors will be slightly different. I don't know why, but it just works that way. So you have to adjust the color of them to make sure that they match the rest of the wall. After you'll be done, again group all those pieces into one big wall. What I would recommend is to create several different designs of those walls and save them as a blueprint, so then you can combine those designs and create bigger rock formations without those walls looking too repetitive. Or you can just download my wall set from the workshop, the link will be down in the description, as well as the links for the rock piles, the bigger ones and the smaller ones. The creativity of Planet Zoo community is just endless, and over the time I saw many different ways of creating custom rocks and custom rock formations in the game, and here are my favorite examples. First of all, the South American stone heads. They have this really beautiful stone texture, and placing several of them next to each other, making sure that the face part is not visible, can create pretty interesting formations. Mixing them with some other rocks can also look pretty good. Those smaller temple pieces from the South America pack also can create some really nice looking rock formations. The fact that there's also a recolorable version of those pieces makes them usable for all different kinds of enclosures. Just make sure that the smooth square parts are not visible. There's also this piece. After you'll sink it into the ground, it looks really good as small stones or rubble. Next up, the African decorative rocks and the African kilns. Those are the building pieces from the base game. Unfortunately, they are not recolorable, but this color can really work well for desert or savanna habitats. There are not too many pieces of those rocks, so I wouldn't use them for big habitats as they can look a bit repetitive, but they should be perfect for rock formations in smaller enclosures, for example for meerkats or porcupines. There was a time when everyone was using those faux trees as rock walls, and honestly they look really good to this day. Just make sure to add those roots in between to make them look even more interesting. And finally, the tree trunks. Some of those trees have a really interesting texture on their bark, and by flipping them upside down, you can create those really unique formations that resemble the rocks. Here are some examples of the trees that for me work for that really well. Just make sure that the tree models that you are using don't have roots, and place some plants on the top of those formations to hide the weird ends of the tree trunks that normally are hidden underground. My last tip can be very obvious for some of you, but there are still new players joining our community, and I thought that it is worth mentioning. How to make sure that your animals will be able to use and climb on the intricate rock formations that you will create for your habitats. After placing some rocks and releasing your new animals to the habitat, click on the heat maps in the bottom left corner of the screen and then move to the habitat tab. Make sure that you have the traversable area selected here and then click on the animal in your new habitat. The blue highlight is the area of the habitat that the animal is able to traverse. If something is unreachable for the animal, you can adjust the rocks with the heat map still on to make it easier for yourself. It is of course the best to use the flat rocks as they are traversable for most of the animals in the game. Remember that some animals, especially from the base game, need a lot of flat surface to be able to walk from point A to point B, but the animals like mountain goats, primates or cats shouldn't have problems navigating through those rock formations. Let's move over to the part of the video where I will try to slowly add all the rock walls, rock formations and smaller stones to the habitat in a quick tutorial. I decided to build a simple habitat for the alpine ibex to really showcase all different possibilities when it comes to the rocks in Planet Zoo. So in front of us there is this very simple ibex habitat that I created for this tutorial, and right now I will try to show you how I normally would do a rockwork for such a habitat. Of course it will be a bit simpler because I don't want to make it too long, and also what I wanted to say is when it comes to the plants I normally follow my guidelines. More or less. In here, the rocks, I feel like they depend on the different habitats or just on how I feel and what I have in my head. So it's a bit different for each and every habitat, but I still have some more or less rules that I follow. So let's try to do it right now. As you guys can see, I have a bunch of blueprints prepared here. You can download them all from the workshop. I will use them to make it quicker for myself, and of course all the links to those blueprints will be down in the description of this video. So let's take the rock walls that I already showed you how to create and let's place them in the back for a background of this habitat. We want to create a nice flow, but we don't want them to be too repetitive. This is very important. We want to trick the eye that those are natural rock formations, and the rock formations in the natural world are not repetitive at all, like never. So we will try to do some, I don't know, easy stuff, something like this for the background of this habitat. Okay, now that our habitat has a background, let's move on to the regular rocks. So, I've came up with an idea to mix up the tropical rocks with the temperate rocks for this habitat, and this is what I will do. So, let's take those flat rocks that have this rough texture that I already told you about at the beginning, and let's try to place them in the way that they sort of flow from one to another. A very important thing right now, you cannot really see those textures, so what you need to do is change the time of the day slightly, and right away you can see those, and this just makes wonders for creating those rock formations. So let's grab, for example, this rock, maybe let's place it like this. I'm just, coming up with the idea for this rock formation from my head. No inspiration, nothing. Just trying to match the rocks so they sort of look good together. Okay, and now let's mix in some temperate rocks. So you sort of want to them to be firstly more like mixed, and then go into like a solid temperate color. While placing those rocks, I sort of think of them as stairs. I already know that this technique works when it comes to the animals and they are really able to use them. So as you guys can see, I'm slowly creating a rock formation that uses a lot of different like pathways and also stairs using my favorite flat rocks. And in the end, when we will check it, I am sure that the ibex will be able to actually use those. So yeah, it all comes with experience of playing this game. Okay, let's just stop there and let's see if it is actually able to use it. We need to unpause the game, go there to the habitat. Yeah, it is traversable. So amazing. Now, as we are going from bigger things to smaller things, next up I would use the rock piles. So let's grab one of those that I already created and let's just place it in several places. We are adding additional textures and just some points of interest to this rock formation. And I think that it makes such a huge difference and makes the whole rock formation look so much realistic. And you can see I'm placing the same one over and over again, but because I'm rotating it, it doesn't really look that much the same. So yeah, that was something that I would normally do. And now let's go and grab the small rock pile from the small stones. And this can take some time, but because I'm normally surrounding those with those smaller stones and also adding them in crevices of the rock formations. So this is something that we will just do. So again, adding some textures, adding some just, some for realism. This is just some rubble that has been breaking off the bigger rocks and just adding different details. As you guys probably know, I'm always adding to my habitats, and because of them, I don't know how my PC is still surviving, but it is doing quite well. So I hope that I will be still able to create those things in the future. If not, I'll have to invest in the new one because I don't intend to stop. And here is our ibex using the rock formations that we actually created in this quick tutorial. I hope it was helpful for you. I know that it was very quick, but oh, what a jump. But I didn't want to make it too long, and we've talked about those things in the previous part of the video. I just wanted to show you all those tips in action. Of course, while doing my own habitat, I would probably add some decals. I will add a lot of plants, different branches and stuff to make this habitat just more complete. But oh my god, this is how it simply looks right now. Maybe let's hop out of this and let's look at this rock formation that we were able to quickly forget. And this is a disaster because our ibex is now out of the habitat. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed our quick tutorial. Okay, this is all when it comes to today's ultimate rockwork tutorial. I really hope that I was able to teach you something about rocks in Planet Zoo. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel not to miss any future tutorials. If you are interested in any other tutorials from me, let me know down in the comments and tell me what else you would like to learn. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it and ring the bell not to miss any future uploads from me. Thank you guys so much for watching, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!